thanks for including the process sketches, which I didn't ask for, but I think it gives a good sense of how the game evolved. All right, for our fifth presenter, before we jump into the discussion component of the panel, is Frank D.
Hey everybody, my name is Frank DeLise.
Frank.
General manager of a new studio in New York City called Chaos Studios. We've been around for about 14 months so far. And we're about 60 people, roughly, right about now. Before I go into the detail of Fuel of War, I just want to tell you a little history about how it started, because actually I did a kind of full circle with New York City, and it's a pretty interesting story. So I went to college in Farmingdale, out in the middle of Long Island, for computer graphics. And so I started out kind of as an artist, even though I went to school for engineering and computer science type stuff. But shortly after that, I was actually hired by Autodesk. I don't know if anybody know 3D Studio Max. I joined the Autodesk to be the lead designer of 3D Studio Max right after 3D Studio DOS was out. But I had to move to California to do that because there really wasn't a lot of stuff going on the East Coast at that time for 3D and 3D programs, that kind of stuff, and I was really interested in getting into it. So I actually went to San Francisco, worked on Max for about 7 years, eventually became the project manager. And then I was during that whole cycle, I was actually working with game developers across the United States, finding out what their workflow was, writing tools for them, everyone from Westwood to EA, and helping them along with their project and designing this tool that they were using. And I decided at one point, I was like, I've been building these tools for so long for game developers, and I love games, why not make a game? So of course this was going to be a really difficult challenge. I wanted to be back in New York, and I've never really done a game before at that point, but I knew how that worked, and I knew how to make art, and I knew how the programming worked, and all the tools around it. So I actually came back and set up shop in the middle of Long Island by myself. And I decided to create a game that I really wanted to play, which was a modern military game that was fast-paced and just didn't exist at the time. So Tribes was out there. There's some kind of sci-fi games out there that I was really into. But it wasn't quite the experience I wanted, where I wanted to really kind of go anywhere and do anything in this military world. So shortly after, actually, a game called Battlefield 1942 came out, which was kind of a World War II game by EA that really had a lot of depth as far as vehicle play and planes, and you really can run on the ground, or you can actually get in vehicles and fly them around. So I decided to actually use that as the base to create a new game called Desert Combat, it was at the time. And so I started off by just creating some tank models, but then I realized Battlefield didn't have any tools. But since I knew a lot of people in the industry that wrote tools, and I knew how to program a little bit, I started gathering people out there in the industry for free to start helping with this endeavor. So it was going to be a free project. We're going to release it to the public. And so we did that. So I got eventually, just put some screenshots up there, got people interested in it from everyone from people like Joe here is my producer at Chaos. He was actually doing military cockpits and training. He was really excited about the projects he joined. And we got a really good group of people together that really wanted to create this game. So we actually wrote all the tools, and we started releasing images to the public. And we also started releasing builds. It started at like 20,000 people playing, and quickly enough, actually, it went up to 100,000, 200,000 people playing, to over 3 million people playing, which was really successful at the time for a free online game. Actually increased the sales of Battlefield by 45%, and which was a really exciting project because it was a back and forth with EA, and they were confused about what we were doing, how it was increasing their sales, and we actually ended up working together pretty tightly at the end. So during this process, though, once new people started getting to like it, Desert Combat, we formed Trauma Studios, which was started in New York in 2001, and basically did agreements with everybody that if it made money, we'd all get a percentage of it, and form this kind of agreements that even though we're all kind of doing different jobs, we'd work together for something that could mean something. So Desert Combat actually ended up leading us to our first real project, which was the research and development for Battlefield 2. So at that point, we actually we were working for EA and DICE collectively to design their next Battlefield series, the gameplay elements of it. So that was pretty exciting. We're about 15 people at that point, so the goal was starting to come alive that we were going to create a studio in New York, which wasn't a lot of development then as far as the development side in New York. So then Basically, after the R&D project was done, we were actually acquired by Digital Illusions to work on our next game. And that was going really, really well, but DeLise was then acquired by EA. So now EA actually owns Digital Illusions. And the choice was pretty much move to Sweden, where DICE was located, or move to California. And again, it was that I've got a great team, I want to stay in New York, let's build something around New York. So I decided to leave.
Yeah! Stay in New York.
Stay in New York, keep the entire team, and actually create a new studio from that called Chaos Studios with THQ. And I'll go into a little bit later about the publishing side of THQ and how awesome it is. But so this is our first project, and this project is called Frontlines Field of War. And again, it's about a little over 2-year project, the 10 million plus type budget, this AAA type product for PC, 360, and PS3. And the design goal around it was to create again, a next generation military game, stuff that's going to come out in the near future, but not only expand on just the multiplayer side where Desert Combat and stuff was, but to really change the way single player was going to be played. And I'll go over that in the design section of the game. But you can see the next slideshow here. It's it depicts 20 years in the future amidst the global energy crisis. Sounds a little familiar, but where you get to actually play an intense single-player storyline that's completely non-linear, and you get to actually choose how you want to fight throughout these battles. So the main design goal around it was to create a non-linear story where you don't die, redo in typical first-person shooters. You kind of go forward, and then it steps you back in time after you die. But instead to actually choose how you want to attack any of the objectives in an open-world type setting. And then once you die, you actually become another member of your division until you actually continue to win this war in this big front line that you actually push. So it's a really exciting single-player cinematic experience with land vehicles, air vehicles, jets, helicopters, any way you want to fight it out, you can. So it's pretty dynamic. So you can see here's one of the next generation tanks, one of the soldiers you get to play. You can join your buddies online, up to 32 players plus on the Xbox Live and PS3 and PC. So it's going to be one of the very few games that can play over 30 players on over the internet with the Xbox and the PS3. And again, you can see some of your squad mates that you can join up as squads online and fight it out. But I'll go into more of the design goals, and if you want to hear more about that kind of crazy story of how we formed, I'll gladly tell you over drinks later on.
Thank you, Frank. Excellent.